Hello. Thank you for tuning into my channel. It's Vlogmas in July 2024, day 6, the first day of our scrap series. So if you want to know how I sort and organize these scraps in this container, please stay tuned. I have been debating with myself for the last couple minutes just how I wanted to film this, but I think we'll start here and then we'll go to the scrap buckets individually in just a minute. So when it comes to scraps and how you organize them, it is completely up to you. Everybody has their own preference about the types of quilts they like to make, what sizes they typically use, all those things. And then, even if you have to decide if you want to make a scrap quilt. And for me, and I know for a lot of other quilters, it's just hard to let fabric go. You don't want to waste it. You don't want to just throw it away. You don't want to give it away if you feel like you can use it in a future project. And what I enjoy about scrap quilting is that some of my favorite pieces of fabric just keep showing up over and over and over. And I just love that. So it's kind of I guess the thrill of being able to get more out of something. So it's not just for one quilt. It's usually for a main fabric in one quilt, and then maybe a smaller bit in a different quilt, and then maybe it eventually becomes a crumb or a string. And I think that's something cool that we get to do. We get to explore just using the same color, the same fabric over and over in a lot of different projects. And so your work kind of gets spread out over many different quilts or wall hangings or whatever. I've made several scrap quilts. This is one, the rainbow string quilt. And I've also made several lately where I haven't really purchased any fabric except maybe some backing. So this video is just about how I organize my scraps. Again, it's up to you how you choose to. And maybe this is just a few suggestions that you hadn't thought about. Well, maybe that could be something to think about. So I'm going to start here. This is my scrap bucket, and I'll show you just a few things in here. So when I'm done with a fabric or when I get through cutting what I need, if the piece is smaller than a fat quarter, I'll put it in here. So if I cut a fat quarter down, like for example, if I take a 10-inch square from a fat quarter, I may go ahead and put it in here. Sometimes I take it back upstairs, but I'm going to try to be better about that and just putting it straight in here so there are not a lot of tiny pieces of fabric upstairs. And if I took you upstairs to I have a chest of drawers that has some fabric, and right now it's kind of bulging because it needs to be organized and sorted through, but I just haven't made it to that step yet. Maybe in the next few weeks it'll be on my list of things to do. So for right now, I'll show you just a few things that are in here. One thing that if I have extra batting, after quilting a quilt, the extra piece may go in here because by that time I'm kind of done with the quilt and I don't want to fool with it again. But I do have to come back and get the fabric off of here. Of course, it could just go in the trash. It's served its purpose, but this is still a pretty good bit of fabric. So I'm going to cut that off and get the strip that I can get. And probably the batting will go in the trash because it's just a really thin strip. Another thing that's in here, this is a leftover piece from a quilt backing. It's from my butterfly garden quilt. And these are nice big pieces of fabric that I just have not cut down yet. And I'm not sure what I want to do with them, if I want to keep them like this or go ahead and cut scraps out of them. Let's see. These are from my Starlight Starbright quilt. They're just the leftover pieces that I've not cut down yet. So I need to go through these, cut them down, so that they will be, they're not unusable now, but I need to cut them down into some sizes that I can come back to in a little bit instead of just having it big like this. Let's see. Anything else? This is a purple fabric that keeps coming back and back and back. And actually, it's going to come back as a border on this quilt. And so I'm actually going to move this piece because I'm going to need it for the border. So I'm going to move it and put it with the other fabric like this. Just a variety of different things. These are what I've shown are pretty big pieces, but there are some fairly small pieces that were just left over and I haven't sorted through them yet. So I will take some time and cut through a couple of these with you on camera after we go through how I store them so that I can show you what I'm going to do with them and how I store them. For storage of your scraps, it's just like what I said earlier. It's up to you. I really didn't purchase anything specifically for storing scraps, but I had some storage containers around and I decided to bring them into my sewing room for the scraps. So let's go through one bit at a time. We will go biggest to smallest, and I will let you see what I have in each of the of my categories. Some of the categories I just started, so there's not a lot in there, and that's okay. But the important thing is that I have kind of a system that I can work with, and hopefully I can get this down a little bit without adding too much into it. Okay, so let's get started looking at the different ways I store my fabric and the sizes. When I cut down my scraps, the first thing that I'm going to look for is a 10-inch square. This is the largest piece that I'll cut for scraps. And I really just started doing this within the last year or two. And so there really are not a lot in here. The way that I started was I did a backing that just had 10-inch squares. And so then the leftovers from that, I wanted to cut those into 10-inch squares first. So there are not a lot, but I recently pulled a few of these for a giant Jacob's Ladder quilt that I'm going to do in a little bit. So this is pretty cool. And actually, now that I'm looking at it, it's more than I thought. But typically, I'm not getting 10-inch squares unless I'm actually cutting them from yardage. And then I'll put the leftovers in this stack. So I start with 10-inch squares. That's going to be the biggest scrap that I'll cut. Again, anything that's a fat quarter or larger is upstairs. My next biggest cut that I look to make is 5-inch squares. And I have my 5-inch squares just stored in a little shoe type box that I got from, I'm sure I got it from Walmart in an 8-pack or 10-pack or something like that. And I sort these into lights and darks. Okay, and so I have a lot of color of these, not so many lights and darks right now, but as I go through my scraps, I may be able to cut some more of these. So after 10-inch squares, the next thing I cut is 5-inch squares. Now, if I have full width of fabric, and when I cut yardage, the first thing I'll do is I will cut a 2.5-inch strip off of any yardage that I cut. So I will get a 2.5-inch strip that is width of fabric, and all of my width of fabrics I'm going to store here. In this little baggie, I have all my color 2.5-inch strips, and then in this other baggie are the lights. Okay, so some of these are solid because they came from like a jelly roll, and then some of these I've cut from yardage, and some of these I've cut from backing. And then if I have a strip that's maybe less than 10 inches wide, I'll cut a 2.5-inch strip off of that first before I cut the smaller strips. Now, just recently, when I did the rainbow string quilt that's over on my wall, I wondered and thought about, and I'm still thinking about if I want to do a what is it called? A potato chip block or a potato chip quilt. And so I decided to cut some 2.5 by 4.5-inch rectangles. This is very new, and so I only have that many. I do have a ton of 2.5 inch strips that are left over from that project that are not quite full with the fabric. So I have them here because I'm thinking about doing a piano key border for that quilt. So I do have more 2.5 inch strips here, but they're not full with the fabric. And like I said, I think they're going to that quilt. And I'm going to cut, when I cut my other fabrics, I'll cut the purple that's like this, and I'm going to put that in here too for the for that first border. Okay. So far we have 10-inch squares, 5-inch squares, 2.5 inch strips that are with the fabric, 2.5 by 4.5 inch rectangles. Now these are my 2.5 inch squares. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I turned my light off. I didn't mean to do that. Okay, so these are my 2.5 inch squares, and I have these sort of by color. So I'll show you here. And so I have them, they're a little messy. So red, orange, yellow. So red, pink, orange, yellow. Can you see that? Yeah. And then green, blue, purple on this side. And then I have blacks and grays, and then lights right here. And I've started making postage stamp blocks, but I like for my postage stamp blocks to have completely unique fabrics. And I need, I think I need 18 of each. And these I've started, but I haven't gotten completely unique fabrics to finish them. So they are still waiting to be completed. But I do have some postage stamp blocks over there that are finished, but these ones on top are not quite finished. All right. And so after my 2.5 inch strips, I do have strings. Let me show you these. So these are strips of fabric that are less than 2.5 inches wide and usually longer than 5 inches. If they're 5 inches or shorter, I put them in a different place that I'm going to show you in just a second. But these are strings, and I have this bag of strings, and I also have 2 drawers on the other side of the room that are full of strings. These are color strings, and then I have another drawer of color strings and a drawer of light strings. So these are pretty cool. And like if I dig through these, but like even right here, look at that. This is not a string. So it has to go in the other place because it's wider than 2.5 inches. So I'll be able to get like maybe a string out of this and some squares, but I'm going to put that in the other place. Okay. And my last little bit, and again, this is fairly new. Let me bring you down here. My last little bit is fairly new. Not keeping the size, but the sorting. So my last section is the crumbs. And so this is a shoebox that I have some crumbs in. Okay. This is a lot of different crumbs. These are typically smaller than 2.5 inches square or odd shapes. So like triangles or let's see, that's a rectangle, but it's smaller than 2.5 inches. This is a probably left over from a string block. And so it's still together like this. And so these are going to go in with my crumbs. I recently started sorting my crumbs by color. So I have all different colors. So purple, red, pink, blue. I have a green. I hope y'all can see that. We have brown, orange, yellow. This is what I call multi. So it's different colors on white on different backgrounds. So you can see that. And then black, gray, what I call it, black, white, and gray. And then this one is white and beige. And then yellow is at the bottom. Okay. So, oh, and I have burgundy or maroon. Okay. So all of these are just different sizes, smaller than 2.5 inches. So like if I'm cutting my 2.5 inch squares and I get a really small part, it can go into one of these bags. What I've started to do recently is as soon as I have the crumb, go ahead and sort it by color instead of putting it in a box like this. But I do have, let me show you. In my box, these are left over from my rainbow strings quilt. It's the cutoffs from when I squared up the blocks, and they need to be sorted by color. I'm going to go ahead and stick them in here so that I can work on those a little bit at a time. All right, so this is how I sort my my scraps. You can choose any way that you want to do it. Oh, I forgot one. Let me show you one more thing that I save. If I have a piece of fabric that I really love, I will take the selvage and save it. So I have this bag of selvages that I have not used yet. And then I have another bag that somebody gave me and it's upstairs. But I do keep selvages. All right. So next let's take a couple pieces and cut them and then see how we can put them in some of these containers. When it's time to go through these scraps, what I typically try to do, or what I would like to try to do, is as soon as I cut the fabric, go ahead and cut it down into scraps if I know I'm not going to use it for that project, but that rarely happens. What instead sometimes I do is I just set a timer and then I work on it for maybe 10 minutes. And so that may be like 2 or 3 pieces that I can cut down into usable scraps that I can sort. But, that is enough and it doesn't have to be super stressful. So we're just going to go through, I'm just going to go through a couple pieces. I get my shape cut ruler because this is my shape cut plus ruler because it's the simplest to cut a lot of different cuts at the same time. And then I get a couple smaller rulers if I think that I might need them. Like for this small piece, I might be able to use my smaller ruler. But I'm just going to cut as many pieces as I can. Again, going from largest to smallest for the cuts that I need. Now I pull the purple first and I'm going to zoom us in just a little bit so you can see how I do this. So let's zoom in. Okay, and I'll put you kind of here. I'm going to be sideways, so sorry. So all I'm going to do, since I know this is for a specific project, I'm going to just cut that, the size that I know I'm going to need for the project, which is 2.5 inches. I'm going to take my shape cut ruler, square up each side. I know it's going to be sideways for you guys. So I'm going to square off this side and I'm just going to cut some 2.5 inch strips off of this. And then I'm going to put them with the other pieces for this project. So squaring off the first side, actually I'm going to go over a little bit more. No, I'm not, because this is facing the wrong way. Because I want to get the longest strips that I can, I'm going to leave it like this. Now, let me show you this. This is I'm going to bring you over this way before I cut it. This is actually a 10-inch wide strip. So if I was not going to use it for this project, I would get a 10-inch square out of this first. But since I'm looking for 2.5 inch strips, I'm going to cut some 2.5 inch strips. So let's do that. And I'm going to move you again. I'm sorry. So let me see. Move over strings. Okay. And now since I know that it's 10 inches wide, I can get 4 strips out of this. And I think that's pretty awesome. So, and on this side, it's already squared up pretty good. So here we go. So I'm just going to take my rotary cutter, cut at the 2.5, the 5, and the 7.5. Okay. And the shape cut is so perfect for cutting scraps because it goes so fast and I don't have to stop and remeasure every time. All right. So this is going to go wherever I put that other project. Somewhere. It's in a shoebox that's overflowing as we speak. But I'm going to put it in there. Okay. So I have that to the side. I'm going to take this piece next. I also have my iron set up so that if there's any piece that I need to give a press to, I can do that. Now for this piece, my goal is to get the longest piece that I can. And so I'm going to go here because I know I can get a string off of it. So I'm going to just scoot it over a little bit. Wait, let me see. Can you see where I am? Yeah, you can. All right. So I'm going to square up the first end at the 0. Okay, and then I'm going to cut the 2.5 here so I can get the 2.5-inch strip. Okay, now this section here is a string, so I can put it in my strings. I'm actually going to put it in my light. I was going to put it in my light strings, but I'm just going to put it there because it's right there. All right, and then I'm just going to take this and turn it, and now I can get some 2.5-inch squares off of it. Okay, so here we go. And then 2.5 and 5. All right, and so I got two 2.5-inch squares. This strip is 7 inches long, so the rest of that is going to be a crumb. Okay, so I get the 2 squares off. Here are the 2 squares. They go here, and then the crumb is going over there. So I'm just going to take my 2.5-inch squares right here, and it's really up to me where I put it. I'm going to put it with the light ones. I don't really think it's light. But I'm going to leave it there for right now, just for the sake of time. And then these pieces go in the trash. And then when it comes to my crumbs, I just will, put all that up. When it comes to my crumbs, I will just find the color that I think it goes best with. And I'm going to put it with I can either put it with white and beige or with brown, but I think I'm going to put it with brown. And sometimes it goes with one color, sometimes it goes with another color. Okay, so here is that piece. All right, so I'm going to get a larger piece now so that you can see how that one might go, because I saw something that I think is going to work. Okay, so I'm going to press this first. So this is a larger piece. This is actually a 10-inch strip that I got. And so I'm going to go ahead and cut it down. But let me press it first, and then we'll cut it down to smaller pieces. So here's the thing. I have lots of different options for this. Because it's so big, I can either cut it and get 2.5-inch strips. They will not be with the fabric, so I'm not going to do that. I could also get 5-inch squares. But for me right now, to get the biggest piece that I can get first, I'm going to start with the 10-inch square and then cut whatever I can from what's left. So I have my piece here. I'm just going to sit my shape cut ruler on the top. And I don't think I cut a 10-inch square off of this for the other project. I think I cut smaller squares, but it doesn't matter. So it's, actually this piece is 10.5 inches or 10.25 inches. So let's cut it down to 10 inches first. And I'm just gonna fold it here. And then if these cuts are not perfect, it does not matter. It is not super important. This process is very forgiving. And even though I'm using pre-cut sizes, but I've seen people who cut squares at all different sizes. So even down to 1.5 inches or 2 inches, 3 inches, and so on. You decide what works best for you in your sewing quilting, and whatever works best for you is what works. I just use pre-cut sizes because it's easier for me to think in those terms. And then if I want to add a pre-cut, like if I want to add a background pre-cut, I can do that and make some half square triangles or whatever I need to make out of my squares. So we'll start with 10-inch squares. We'll get as many as we can out of here. So let's see. Okay, so here's 10. All right, so we got 2 out of this thing. All right, that's trash. Okay, so that's 2 10-inch squares. All right, and now here's the other piece. Now it looks like I might be able to get a third 10-inch square, and if I can, I will. But I also have the choice to do 2.5 inches or 5 inches or any smaller size that I want. All right, and so yes, I can get another 10-inch square out of here. Okay. And then what's left becomes a string. So I'm going to put the string down here. Let me show you. I'll put it in the bag with the other strings. There we go. And then these 10-inch squares are going to go into this container. All right. Now I want to try one more where I can get some 5-inch squares, but I think hopefully you can understand what I'm doing. And again, the sizes are up to you, whatever you think is going to work best with your sewing. But let's see if I can find something that I can get a 5-inch square out of without too much hassle. Okay, I found one. I'm pressing first. Okay. All right, so I found this piece here, and I'm going to get a 5-inch square out of it. I'll get a 5-inch square and something else. So we'll see what all we can get out of it. Okay, so first, again, lining up the shape cut here. And so this piece is about 6.5 inches wide. So I know I can get the 5-inch square. So I'm going to cut a big 5-inch strip first. Here's 5 inches. Okay. And then, so this becomes a string, sticking it in the bag. This is trash. Okay. And then I'm squaring up again, putting that in 0, and then 5 inches here. Okay. So I have my 5-inch square, and then I have this piece. Since this piece is 5 inches, I'm just going to make it a crumb. You may choose to cut it down into smaller squares if you wanted to. I'm not doing that. Okay, so this can go in my brown crumbs. And then my 5-inch squares. All right, and so it goes in the dark side, or the color side. Did you see that? There it is. Okay. All right, close the rotary cutter. Now, let me show you just one more thing for the crumbs. Now, because I have crumbs that are, let me zoom out just a little bit. I'll show you how I'm going to kind of sort through these. And again, the crumbs is something that I might set the timer for and just work on it for a little bit because it can be tedious. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick a color bag, and then from this bag, I'll just pull out of that color so I get it. Okay, so I pulled the white and beige. So I might just take like 5 minutes and just go through here and just pull out the ones that I think are white and beige. So one, I'll pull out like 5 of them. 2, 3. We can count this 4. And for this one, if I wanted to cut it down into like a 2.5-inch square, I could, but I'm not going to do that right now. Let's see. Here's some whites. 5, and like for this one that has 2 on there, I can rip it, or cut it. I prefer to cut it, but I just happen to be ripping right now because I don't have my scissors. And then sometimes as I go through here, I find things that are too small to be crumbs, which is perfect. Like this one right here is teeny tiny, so it can go straight in the trash. Okay, so all of these are just great little ways to store your fabrics, your scraps, so that you can eventually create some new fabric. Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. I feel like I just gave you a whirlwind of information about scrap storage and all that, but hopefully it has inspired you to save scraps if you have not saved them, giving you a different idea about either cutting them or storing them, something like that. Hopefully it's helped you in this video. In the coming weeks, we're going to explore scraps more as I show you some specific ways that I've used some of the pieces that I've cut to create different blocks and quilts and a variety of projects. So stay with me. Next week, we're going to explore using some of our squares that we've cut in the scrap and incorporating those into some quilt blocks. So I'm super excited to share that with you. We will also look at strips and strings, and maybe crumbs and selvages. So definitely stay tuned to the channel for the rest of July so that we can explore our scraps together. And I know that some of you have tips, tricks. Some of you have different ways that you store your scraps or that you cut them that could definitely be of benefit to somebody else. I also know that the YouTube community has a ton of scrap organization videos that you can explore. If you have any questions about what you've seen in this video, leave them in the comments below. Thumbs up this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!